The auction block on Tarsai's station stank of fear and desperation. Beings from a dozen species crowded the marketplace, haggling over merchandise that ranged from exotic foods to illegal tech and slaves. Karan huddled in the corner of her cage, her once vibrant blue skin now ashen and dull. She didn't bother looking up when the auctioneer approached. 6 years in captivity had taught her that eye contact only invited punishment. "Final lot of the day," the four-armed Vugan auctioneer announced, his voice amplified through the station's speakers. "Julahan female, military caste if you can believe it." He chuckled and the crowd followed suit. Previous owners report she was quite the fighter, initially. Karan didn't react. She'd stopped fighting years ago. Her clan tattoos, once proudly displayed along her throat and shoulders, were now obscured by scar tissue. One of her 4 eyes remained permanently closed from an old injury. "Starting bid at 10 credits, the auctioneer called out, then waited. No one responded. "Fine, 5 credits. The crowd shifted, uncomfortable. Even at that bargain price, no one wanted damaged goods. "1 credit? Surely she's worth a single credit to someone." The auctioneer's frustration was evident. End-of-day lots that didn't sell meant paperwork and storage costs. A voice came from the back of the crowd. "I'll give you 1 credit." The crowd parted, revealing a human male. He wasn't particularly tall or imposing, just average, with dark hair streaked with gray and eyes the color of warm amber. His clothing was simple, the practical attire of a cargo hauler. Nothing about him suggested wealth or status. The auctioneer's upper arms crossed in annoyance. "Really, human? You're wasting my time for a broken Julahan." The human approached the platform, credit chip in hand. "1 credit, that was your offer." A Krull merchant nearby snorted. "The human wants a pet, or maybe a plaything." "Not worth the trouble," another trader called out. "That one's spirit is crushed, won't even make a good servant." The human ignored them, his eyes fixed on Karan. For the first time in years, she lifted her head slightly, curiosity momentarily overcoming her caution. Humans were rare in this sector, and this one wasn't looking at her with disgust or hunger. "Fine," the auctioneer snatched the credit chip. "All sales final, no refunds when she dies on you next week." The cage door slid open with a metallic screech. Karan didn't move, waiting for the inevitable leash or prod that would force her to her feet. Instead, the human knelt down, still outside the cage. "My name is Elias," he said softly. "I'm not going to hurt you." Karan stared at him, searching for deception. Her remaining 3 eyes blinked in confusion. "You're free now," he continued, extending his hand. "If you want to leave, I'll help you. If you want to stay here on the station, that's your choice too." Free, the word meant nothing to her anymore, but something in his voice, a gentleness she'd forgotten existed, made her tremble. When she didn't move, Elias simply waited. The crowd began to disperse, losing interest in what they deemed a futile gesture. The auctioneer had already moved on to counting the day's profits. "Water," Elias offered, pulling a container from his pack. Karan's throat constricted. Clean water was a luxury she rarely received. Slowly, painfully, she edged forward. Her hand, blue and scaled with 3 long fingers, reached out, stopping just short of the container. "It's okay," he said. "It's yours." Their fingers brushed as she took the water, and she flinched at the contact. But Elias didn't move away. He didn't grab her or assert dominance. He simply remained kneeling, patient and still as she drank. "I have a small ship," he said when she finished. "There's a med bay, food, privacy, or I can take you somewhere else, whatever you want." Karan spoke for the first time, her voice rough from disuse. "Why?" Elias smiled sadly. "Because everyone deserves to choose their own path." He stood slowly, offering his hand again. "What's your name?" She hesitated, then whispered, "Karan." "Well, Karan," he said as she cautiously placed her hand in his, "it's good to meet you." As they walked away from the auction block, Karan felt something she hadn't experienced in years. A fragile, terrifying sensation that she couldn't quite name. It took her until they reached the docking bay to recognize it. Hope. The low hum of the cargo ship's engines provided a constant backdrop as Karan sat motionless on the edge of the small bunk. Elias had shown her to this room, her room, he'd called it, before leaving her alone. The door remained unlocked. She'd checked it 3 times already. Freedom felt like a trap. 6 years of captivity had taught her that kindness always came with a price. A gentle knock on the door made her flinch. "Karan," Elia's voice was soft. "I've prepared some food if you're hungry." She didn't respond, but the door slid open anyway. Elias stood in the doorway, careful not to enter her space, a tray balanced in his hands. "It's nothing fancy," he said, setting the tray on a small table. "Standard protein, some synthesized fruit. The flea tissue meals aren't great, but they're nutritious." Karan watched him warily. Her damaged eye throbbed. A phantom pain the medic had said would eventually fade. The ship's medical unit had treated her immediate injuries, a clinical drone that asked no questions as it mended broken bones and applied regenerative gel to her wounds. "Why am I here?" she finally asked. Elias leaned against the wall, maintaining his distance. "Because you chose to come." "No one chooses without reason," she said, her native accent making the human words sound harsher than intended. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing," he sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "Look, I was a soldier once, saw too many broken things, did too much breaking myself." His amber eyes met hers. "Sometimes helping someone else is just the only way to make sense of things." The explanation sounded hollow, yet something in his expression seemed genuine. Karan reached for the food, her movements stiff and guarded. "We'll reach Meridian Station in 3 days," Elias continued. "It's neutral territory, good medical facilities. You can decide your next steps there." When she didn't respond, he added, "The ship's AI responds to your voice now. If you need anything, just ask." That night when the nightmares came, as they always did, Karan woke to find herself screaming in her native tongue, clawing at enemies who weren't there. She expected punishment for the disruption. Instead, the ship's lights gently brightened to a soft glow, and the AI's neutral voice offered assistance. Elias never mentioned her screams the next morning. Instead, he showed her the ship's small hydroponics section where he grew fresh herbs, explaining each plant with quiet enthusiasm. When his hand accidentally brushed hers, they both froze, him with concern, her with terror. But no blow came, no demand followed. By the second day, Karan found herself standing in the cockpit doorway, watching as Elias navigated through an asteroid field. "My clan lived in mountains," she said suddenly. "Deep caves with crystal formations, like these rocks, but beautiful." Elias glanced back, surprise evident in his expression. It was the first personal information she had volunteered. "I'd like to see that someday," he replied simply. "They're gone now." She closed her remaining good eyes briefly. "Our warriors couldn't protect them." Elias' hands stilled on the controls. "I'm sorry." And then, after a pause, "I couldn't protect people either, not when it mattered." The shared admission hung between them, neither a bond nor a burden, but something in between, a recognition of mutual scars. On the third day, as the gleaming spires of Meridian Station appeared on the Vyuskron, Karan made her decision. "I want to stay," she said, her voice stronger than it had been since her rescue, "until I decide where to go next." Elias nodded, the corner of his mouth lifting in a slight smile. "My ship isn't much, but you're welcome aboard for as long as you need." For the first time in years, Karan chose her own path. It was a small step, but it was hers. The marketplace on Meridian Station bustled with activity, a riot of colors and sounds that overwhelmed Corinne's senses. She stayed close to Elias as they navigated through the crowd, her newly acquired clothing, simple but clean, still feeling strange against her skin. "The parts dealer should be in the next section," Elias said, checking his tablet. "Then we can." "Well, well," a gravelly voice cut through the market noise. "Isn't this unexpected?" A towering figure blocked their path, a Dravik mercenary, his scarred face splitting into a predatory grin. His eyes locked on Corinne, who had instinctively stepped behind Elias. "Taris," Elias acknowledged, his posture shifting subtly into a defensive stance. "Didn't know you operated in this sector." "I go where the credits lead." The mercenary's four-fingered hand rested casually on his weapon. "And right now, they lead to your little companion." Corinne felt ice spreading through her veins. She recognized the insignia on Taris's shoulder guard, the mark of the consortium, the trafficking ring that had held her captive for years. "She's not for sale," Elias said evenly. Taris chuckled. "Sale implies ownership, human. You can't sell what was already sold to someone else." He pulled out a small projector, displaying an official-looking document. "This merchandise was purchased by consortium traders 5 standard years ago. You're..." acquisition, was illegal. The auction was legitimate, Elias countered. A clerical error. The item wasn't approved for the block. Taurus's eyes narrowed. Hand her over and we'll forget about the penalty fees. Corinne felt herself shrinking, becoming smaller, reverting to the broken creature in the cage. Her breath came in short gasps. Escape was impossible. The consortium always found their property. But Elias didn't back down. She's not an item. She's a person with rights recognized under the Galactic Charter. Rights, Taurus laughed. For a Jellian war criminal, her entire clan was condemned for rebellion. The survivors were legally sentenced to servitude. Elias' voice hardened. That treaty was invalidated 3 years ago when evidence of falsified charges came to light. Check your facts, Taurus. The revelation struck Corinne like a physical blow. 3 years? Her people were cleared 3 years ago while she remained in chains. Irrelevant, Taurus growled. I have retrieval orders and I intend to complete them. The mercenary reached for Corinne, but Elias stepped between them. You'll have to go through me first. The surrounding shoppers quickly backed away, sensing the impending violence. Taurus's hand moved to his blaster. Something shifted in Corinne then, not a sudden burst of courage, but a slow, burning realization. This human, this stranger, was willing to fight for her. Not because she was valuable or useful, but simply because he believed she deserved to be free. And if he believed it, perhaps it was true. Before Taurus could draw his weapon, Corinne stepped out from behind Elias. She straightened to her full height, still shorter than both men, but no longer cowering. I am Corinne, daughter of the seventh cave, she said, her voice carrying across the suddenly quiet marketplace. I am not property. Taurus's eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed in calculation. 2 for the price of 1, then. What happened next was a blur. Taurus lunged, Elias moved to intercept, and station security alarms blared. In the chaos, Corinne found herself running alongside Elias through service corridors, their hastily purchased supplies abandoned. Hours later, huddled in the cargo hold of an automated freight hauler that would carry them to an outer rim station, Elias tended to a cut on his forearm. I'm sorry, he said grimly. I've made you a fugitive now. Corinne shook her head. I was already hunted. She hesitated, then added, you could have left me. No, he said simply, I couldn't have. In the dimness of the hold, Corinne reached out, tentatively, cautiously, and touched Elias' hand. He looked up, surprised. Thank you, she whispered, for seeing me. It wasn't love, not yet. But as the freight hauler carried them toward uncertain futures, something equally precious bloomed between them: trust. The settlement of Haven existed on no official charts. Nestled in a valley on a moon that orbited a gas giant, it housed those who wished to remain unfound. Refugees, exiles, and dreamers seeking to build something new away from galactic politics. 3 months had passed since their escape from Meridian Station. 3 months of careful travel through the shadows of the galaxy, always watching for pursuers. 3 months of healing, not just Curran's physical wounds, but deeper injuries of the spirit. The hydroponic filters need adjusting again, Elias said, entering the small prefab shelter they shared. Winter's coming. If we don't increase the heat circulation, we'll lose half the crops. Curran looked up from the communications array she was repairing, her deft fingers manipulating delicate circuitry. I can look at it tonight. The mineral content in the local water keeps clogging the intake valves. The domesticity of their conversation still surprised her sometimes. How quickly they had fallen into partnership, each contributing what skills they had to their adopted community. Haven had welcomed them without questions. One more human, one more alien, both carrying scars visible and invisible. Here, species mattered less than willingness to contribute. Curran found herself teaching younger residents self-defense techniques from her warrior training, while Elias' piloting skills made him valuable for occasional supply runs. Later that evening, as they walked along the edge of the settlement, Curran stopped to watch the gas giant rise over the horizon, its swirling colors casting an ethereal glow across the landscape. It reminds me of the crystal caves, she said softly. Elias nodded, understanding what she didn't say, that beauty could exist alongside loss, that memories could be reclaimed without being consumed by them. A child's scream shattered the moment. They both reacted instantly, running toward the sound. At the settlement's perimeter, they found a group of children who had wandered too close to the unstable cliffs that bordered the western edge. One child, a young Turalan with feathered skin, dangled precariously from an outcropping. Without hesitation, Curran moved. Her Julayan physiology, evolved for mountainous terrain, allowed her to navigate the steep incline with sure-footed grace. She reached the child just as the rock began to give way, scooping the youngster into her arms and leaping to safer ground moments before the ledge collapsed. The child clung to her, trembling. "Thank you," the little one whispered in a musical voice. Something broke open inside Curran, not a wound, but a healing. For so long, she had defined herself by what had been taken from her freedom, her clan, her dignity. In this moment, she was defined instead by what she could give: protection, safety, kindness. When she returned to Elias, the look in his eyes made her breath catch. Not pity or approval, but a recognition so profound it felt like coming home. That night, as they sat before the heating unit in their shelter, Elias spoke of his past for the first time. His years in the Earth Coalition forces, the civilian massacre he couldn't prevent, his dishonorable discharge for defying orders during the aftermath. How he'd wandered for years, trying to balance an unbalanced scale. "I don't think we ever really heal," he said, watching the artificial flames. "We just learn to build something new around the broken parts." Karan moved closer to him on the bench they shared. Slowly, deliberately, she took his hand in hers. When he looked at her, questioning, she leaned forward and pressed her forehead to his, the traditional Julayan gesture of deepest trust. "Then we build together," she said. When his lips met hers, hesitant and gentle, she didn't flinch away. For the first time since her capture, touch brought comfort instead of fear, connection instead of pain. It wasn't perfect. They were both too damaged for that, but in their imperfection they found something genuine. Beyond the walls of their shelter, Haven continued its quiet existence. And within, two broken beings began to discover that even shattered pieces could form something whole. The warning came at dawn, a coded transmission from one of Haven's outer sensors. A consortium vessel had entered the system, accompanied by a mercenary ship bearing Tuasa's signature. "They found us," Elias said grimly, studying the tactical display in Haven's communal hall. "They must have tracked the supply freighter from our last run." Around them, the settlement's council members exchanged worried glances. Haven had few defenses. Its safety lay in its secrecy, now compromised. "We should leave," Curran said, facing the council. "This is our fight, not yours." An elderly Lovedan shook her head, her translucent skin reflecting the morning light. "Haven exists precisely for moments like this. We do not abandon our own." "They're right," Elias said quietly to Curran. "Running means they'll always hunt us. Maybe it's time to stand." Curran studied his face, the face that had shown her kindness when she'd forgotten such a thing existed. Over the past months, their connection had deepened beyond mere survival, beyond gratitude, into something neither had dared name. "Together then," she agreed. They spent the day preparing. Haven might lack military resources, but its residents possessed ingenuity born of necessity. Sensor scramblers were deployed, makeshift defenses established. Children and elders were hidden in the emergency shelters beneath the settlement. As dusk fell, Curran stood on the ridge overlooking the landing area, watching as two ships descended through the atmosphere. Next to her, Elias checked his old service blaster one last time. "Are you afraid?" he asked. Curran considered the question. Fear had been her constant companion for so long that its absence felt strange. "No," she realized, "not anymore." She wore her clan markings freshly painted on her healed skin, not a restoration of what was lost, but an acknowledgement of who she had become. A warrior again, but fighting now for something chosen rather than something imposed. When Tuas emerged from his ship, flanked by armed consortium guards, he looked unsurprised to find Curran and Elias waiting. "This ends today," the mercenary announced. "The consortium doesn't appreciate being stolen from." "Nobody stole anything," Elias replied evenly. "Curran belongs to herself." Tuas sneered. "Sentiment, inefficient and unprofitable." He gestured to his men. "Take them both, kill anyone who interferes." What the mercenary hadn't anticipated was Haven's residents emerging from concealed positions throughout the landing area, a diverse array of species united in protection of their own. Some held weapons, others simply stood in silent solidarity. Curran stepped forward. Your hunt is over, Tuss. The consortium's documents are forfeit under the Galactic Charter's amendments. I am legally free, as are all my people. Laws change depending on who enforces them, Tuss growled. Out here, no one will notice if an entire settlement goes silent. Actually, came a new voice, people would notice. A third ship descended from the clouds, a patrolcraft bearing the insignia of the Galactic Peacekeepers. Haven's transmission had reached more than just its allies. Faced with legitimate authority and outnumbered, the consortium team retreated to their ship, Tuss's final glare promising this wasn't truly over. But as the Peacekeepers documented Haven's legal status and Curran's freedom under interstellar law, something fundamental shifted in the universe's balance. That night, as celebration swept through the settlement, Curran found Elias standing alone, watching the stars. What happens now? She asked, joining him. He turned to her, his expression open and vulnerable. Whatever we choose. Curran reached for his hand, a gesture that once would have terrified her, now as natural as breathing. I never thanked you properly, she said, for that day at the auction. You didn't need to. I know, she smiled, the expression still feeling new on her face. But I want you to understand, you didn't just buy my freedom, Elias, you showed me how to reclaim it for myself. She placed her hand over his heart. And in doing so, you found yours too. When he pulled her close, she went willingly into his embrace. They had both been lost, he in guilt, she in trauma, each believing themselves beyond redemption. Instead, they had found something unexpected, not rescue, but mutual salvation. I love you, he whispered against her hair, the words simple yet profound. And I you, she replied in the Julayan phrase that had no direct human translation, a promise of belonging that transcended ownership. Around them, Haven continued its celebrations, the community that had become their home. Above them, stars marked paths to worlds they might one day explore together, and between them flowed the quiet certainty that some things, once broken, could become stronger at the mended places. Not because brokenness itself held value, but because the choice to heal, to reach out, to trust again despite all evidence against it, was the most powerful act of defiance against a universe that too often prized possession over compassion. In the end, it wasn't about being worthy of love. It was about being brave enough to accept it.